The rain fell hard over Neo Seoul that night, and the streets were empty except for the occasional drone. Passing overhead, Kang Junho walked slowly through the wet alleyways, his maintenance uniform soaked through and his tool bag heavy on his shoulder. He was tired after 12 hours of fixing broken cargo loaders at the spaceport, and all he wanted was to reach his small apartment and sleep. The year was 2347, and humanity had been part of the Galactic Collective for nearly a century. Now aliens walked the streets of Earth's major cities, and human ships traveled to distant stars. But despite all of this, humans remained a minor species in the eyes of the galaxy. Too young, too primitive, too unremarkable to matter. Junho had never been to space himself. He had never wanted to go. He was just a man who fixed machines that other people used to chase their dreams among the stars. As he turned into a narrow alley that served as a shortcut to his home, he heard something that made him stop. It was a sound like breathing, but wrong somehow, too fast, too desperate. He looked down and saw her, a girl, lay crumpled against the wall, her body half hidden behind old shipping containers. She looked young, maybe in her early 20s, and she wore strange silver clothing that seemed to shimmer even in the darkness. But it was her hair that caught his attention, first pure white like fresh snow, and it seemed to glow faintly in the rain. Junho dropped his bag and knelt beside her. Her skin was pale and cold, and dark liquid that might have been blood stained her side. He touched her shoulder gently, and her eyes flew open. They were not human eyes. They swirled with colors that had no names, shifting like storms trapped in glass. She grabbed his wrist with surprising strength, and her mouth opened to speak. The words came out broken and strange, her voice carrying an accent he had never heard before. "Help me," she whispered. "They are coming. They will find me. Please, human. Please." Junho looked around the empty alley. He knew he should call the authorities. He knew that getting involved with unknown aliens could bring trouble he could not imagine. But the girl was bleeding, and she was afraid, and those two things were enough. "Can you stand?" he asked her. She tried to rise, but collapsed against him. Her body weighed almost nothing, as if her bones were hollow like a bird's. Junho made his decision without thinking further. He lifted her in his arms and carried her through the rain toward his apartment. She lost consciousness before they reached the door, her head falling against his chest, inside his small home. Junho laid her on his bed and gathered what medical supplies he had. He was no doctor, but he knew basic first aid from years of workplace accidents. He cleaned her wound as carefully as he could, and he was relieved to see that the bleeding was not as bad as he had feared. The cut was shallow, and the dark liquid was already beginning to dry as he worked. He studied her face. She looked almost human, but there were differences that became more obvious the longer he looked. Her ears were slightly pointed, and thin silver lines ran beneath her skin like veins of metal. When he finished bandaging her wound, he sat back in his chair and watched her. Sleep hours passed, and the rain continued to fall outside just before dawn. Her eyes opened again. She looked at him with those impossible swirling eyes, and she seemed confused. "Where am I?" she asked, her voice stronger now, but still carrying that strange accent. "My apartment," Junho said. "You were hurt. I found you in the alley." She sat up slowly, wincing at the pain in her side. "You saved me," she said. "A human saved me. You needed help," Junho replied. "What else was I supposed to do?" She stared at him for a long moment, and something changed in her expression. It was as if she was seeing something beyond his face, something invisible to normal eyes. "Chosen," she whispered, and the words seemed to echo in the small room. "What?" Junho asked, confused, but she did not answer. Her eyes rolled back, and she fell unconscious once more. Junho caught her before she could fall from the bed and laid her down gently, pulled a blanket over her, and stepped back, running his hands through his wet hair. What had he gotten himself into? As the first light of morning crept through his window, Something strange happened. The lights in his apartment flickered once, twice, 3 times. His communication panel sparked and went dark outside. He could hear the hum of search drones passing overhead more than he had ever heard before. Something was looking for her, something powerful. Junho moved to the window and looked out at the gray morning sky. The drones were everywhere, scanning every building, every street, every shadow. He stepped back and looked at the sleeping girl. That was when he noticed it. Symbol burned into the skin of her wrist. It was a pattern of interlocking circles, ancient and complex, and it glowed faintly with the same silver light as her hair. Junho had seen that symbol before. Every human who worked at the spaceport knew it. It was the mark of the HFY, the oldest and most powerful species in the galaxy. They were beings of such advanced technology that they seemed like gods to younger races, and they were feared more than any other species in existence. The galaxy whispered stories about them, stories of worlds unmade, of civilizations erased, of power beyond comprehension. And now one of them was sleeping in his bed, calling him chosen in a voice full of wonder and hope. Junho sat down heavily in his chair and stared at the ceiling. He was nobody, just a maintenance worker who fixed broken machines. He had no money, no power, no special skills, yet somehow, impossibly, he had stumbled into something far beyond his understanding. The drones hummed louder outside, and the girl with the silver veins slept on whatever came next. Junho knew his life would never be the same. He just had no idea how true that would turn out to be. The girl woke again when the sun was high in the sky, and this time she stayed awake. She sat up slowly, her silver eyes scanning the small apartment with an expression that mixed caution with curiosity. Junho had not slept at all, and he watched her from his chair with tired eyes. "You should eat something," he said, pushing a bowl of simple rice porridge toward her. "It is not much, but it will help you heal." She looked at the food as if she had never seen anything like it before. Then she lifted the bowl and ate slowly, her movements graceful despite her weakness. When she finished, she set the bowl down and finally met his eyes. "My name is Sioha," she said, "and I owe you my life, Kang Junho." He blinked in surprise. "How do you know my name?" "I know many things," she replied. "I am a HFY oracle, one of 12 beings in all of existence who can perceive the threads of fate itself." Junho laughed, not because it was funny, but because he did not know what else to do. "Fate," he repeated. "You can see the future?" "Not exactly," Sioha explained. "I see possibilities, millions of them, branching and weaving like threads in an endless tapestry. I see which choices lead to which outcomes, which paths lead to survival, and which lead to destruction." She paused, and her expression grew heavy with sorrow. "My people are dying," she continued. "A plague is spreading through the HFY, one that our technology cannot cure. Every day, more of us fall, and soon there will be none left." Junho felt his chest tighten with sympathy. "I am sorry," he said quietly. "That is terrible." The oracles gathered together and looked into the future. Sioha went on. "We searched every thread, every possibility, looking for any path that led to our survival in almost every future. We saw only extinction, only silence, only the end of everything we are." Her voice trembled, but she forced herself to continue. "But there was one thread, thin and fragile, but real, one future where our people survived." "What future?" Junho asked. "One that begins with you." The words hung in the air between them. Junho stared at her, waiting for her to laugh, to tell him it was a joke, but her eyes were deadly serious. Each oracle was tasked with finding the one being across the galaxy whose actions could change fate. She said, "We searched trillions of lives. Some of my sisters found legendary warriors, others found brilliant scientists. Others found powerful admirals who commanded fleets of thousands." She reached out and touched his hand. her fingers cold but gentle. I searched longer than any of them, and at the end of all my searching, I found you, a maintenance worker who has never held a weapon, who has never left his homeworld, who fixes broken machines in a quiet corner of a forgotten planet. Junho pulled his hand back slowly. You made a mistake, he said, his voice flat. I am nobody. I am the least important person you could have found. There is nothing special about me. The threads do not lie, Siola insisted. In every timeline where my people survive, it begins with you. I do not understand why yet, but I know it is true. Before Junho could respond, the lights in his apartment flickered and dyed. The air grew cold, and a low humming sound filled the room. Siola's face went pale with fear. They found me, she whispered. The wall of his apartment exploded inward, and 3 figures stepped through the dust and debris. They were Vethkai, but they looked nothing like Seal-Hathis. Were warriors tall and armored in black metal that seemed to drink the light around it. Their eyes burned with cold silver fire, and they carried weapons that hummed with deadly energy. The leader stepped forward and looked at Siola with contempt. Oracle, he said, his voice like grinding stone. You have betrayed our people with this madness. There is no salvation in weakness, no hope in lesser species. Commander Valeth, Siola pleaded. Please listen to me. The threads have shown me the truth. If you kill the human, our people die, all of us, forever. Valeth laughed. And it was a terrible sound. We would rather die with dignity than be saved by genetic refuse, he said, turning his burning eyes toward Junho. Look at him. No strength, no power, no worth. This is the savior you offer us. Junho stood up slowly. His heart was pounding, but something stubborn was rising inside him, something that refused to bow. Even in the face of gods, I do not know anything about fate or threads or whatever else you're talking about, he said quietly. But I know she was hurt and alone, and I helped her. That is what humans do. Valeth raised his weapon. Foolish creature, he snarled. You understand nothing. Junho grabbed the only thing within reach, his maintenance wrench, and stood between the hunters and Siola. Maybe I understand more than you think, he said. You are so afraid of hope that you would rather kill it than be proven wrong. Valeth froze. His weapon still raised. The other hunters exchanged uncertain glances. What did you say to me? Valeth demanded. I said you are afraid, Junho repeated, his voice steady despite his fear. Your people are dying, and instead of fighting for survival, you are fighting against it. What kind of warriors does that make you? The silence that followed was heavier than any words. Junho watched Valeth's face, looking for any crack in that cold armor. He had nothing but words. He could only hope they were enough. The tension in the ruined apartment was thick enough to choke on. Junho stood his ground with his wrench raised, knowing it was useless against the armored warriors before him, but he refused to step. Acid Visliv weapon hummed with deadly energy, pointed directly at Junho's chest. You dare speak to me of fear? The commander hissed. I have fought wars that lasted longer than your species has existed. I have watched stars die and civilizations crumble. You are nothing but dust that thinks itself important. Maybe, Junho admitted, but even dust can get in your eyes. One of the hunters behind Valeth made a strange sound, something that might have been a laugh. Quickly, Supersa Junho noticed it immediately. He looked past Valeth to the hunter who had made the sound, a younger warrior whose silver eyes seemed less cold than the others. You, Junho said, addressing the young hunter directly. What is your name? The hunter hesitated, caught off guard by the question. Kethan, he answered after a moment. Kethan, Junho repeated. Have you ever lost someone you loved? The question struck like a physical blow. Kethan's expression flickered with pain before he could hide it. Do not answer him, Valeth commanded. He is trying to manipulate you, but Junho continued speaking, his voice gentle now instead of defiant. I lost my sister when I was young, he said. There was a plague on Earth, a terrible sickness that swept through our cities. I caught it too. But I survived. She did not. Kethen's weapon lowered slightly, almost unconsciously. For years afterward, I was angry, Junho continued. Angry at the universe, angry at fate, angry at myself for living when she died. I wanted to destroy something, anything, just to make the pain go away. He looked at Valeth with something like pity. But destruction does not ease grief. It only spreads it. I learned it the hard way. Enough. Valeth shouted, raising his weapon higher. I will not listen to the philosophy of insects. We came here to end this madness, and end it we shall. He aimed at Seolha, his finger tightening on the trigger, but Kethen moved first. The young hunter stepped between Valeth and his target, his own weapon raised against his commander. No, Kethen said quietly. The other hunter, a female warrior with scars across her face, drew her weapon as well. But she seemed uncertain about which side to point it toward. What are you doing? Valeth demanded, his voice rising with fury. What I should have done from the beginning, Kethen replied. The oracle says this human is the key to our survival. I choose to believe her. You choose weakness over honor. I choose hope over pride. The two warriors faced each other, their weapons humming with deadly potential. Seola pulled herself to her feet, her wound bleeding again from the movement. Please, she begged. Do not fight each other. Our people need every warrior we have left. If you kill each other here, you only speed our extinction. Valeth's eyes blazed with rage. Then let extinction come. He roared. Better to die as Vethkai than to live as beggars, saved by creatures who cannot even leave their own world. He fired at Kethen, but the young hunter was faster. Kethen dodged and returned fire, his blast striking the wall behind Valeth. Scarred female warrior finally made her choice. She turned her weapon on Valeth and fired. The blast caught the commander in the shoulder. Spinning him around, he crashed against the remains of Junho's wall and slumped to the ground. Unconscious but alive, the scarred hunter lowered her weapon and looked at Junho with eyes full of conflicting emotions. I am Lieutenant Marin, she said. I am not yet certain if this is wisdom or madness, but I have followed Valeth into battle for centuries, and I have never seen him afraid before tonight. That fear tells me the oracle might be right. Kethen turned to Junho and Seola. You need to leave this planet, he said urgently. Valeth is not alone. There are others who think as he does, and they will come in greater numbers. Take the oracle and run. Run where? Junho asked. I have never been off Earth in my life. The spaceport, Seola said weakly, grabbing his arm for support. You work there. You know the ships. There must be something we can use. Junho's mind raced. There was an old courier ship in Bay 7, a Conrad, fast little vessel that had been abandoned after its owner died without heirs. Junho had been maintaining it for years, keeping it functional out of habit more than necessity. I know a ship, he said, but I do not know how to pilot it properly. I am just a mechanic. Then pilot it improperly, Marin said with grim humor. Better a bad pilot than a dead one. Kethen helped lift Seola, and Junho grabbed his tool bag out of pure instinct together. The small group moved through the shattered apartment and out into the streets. The search drones were everywhere, but Marin raised a device that seemed to scramble their sensors. They moved quickly through back alleys and maintenance tunnels, paths that Junho knew better than anyone. When they finally reached the spaceport, Junho led them to Bay 7. The old courier ship sat there waiting. Exactly as he had left it. It was small and unglamorous, but its engines were in perfect condition. Junho had made certain of that. Can you fly this? Kethen asked. Junho looked at the ship, at the vessel he had repaired and cared for countless times. I fix broken things, he said quietly, looking at Seolha's pale face. Let us go fix your people. He climbed aboard and began the startup sequence behind them. Alarms began to sound. The hunt was not over yet. The courier ship shot through Earth's atmosphere like a bullet fired at the stars. Junho gripped the controls with white knuckles, his heart pounding as warning lights flashed across the console. He had never actually flown a ship before, only maintained them, repaired them, kept them ready for others to fly. But desperation was a powerful teacher behind him. Sioha lay strapped into a medical bed that Marin had set up. Her wound reopened and bleeding Silver Kethan stood at the weapons console, watching for pursuit. Marin had stayed behind to cover their escape, and Junho did not know if she was still alive. 3 vessels are following us, Kethan reported, his voice tight with tension. Velith must have called for reinforcements before we escaped. Can we outrun them? Junho asked. Not in this ship. They're faster and better armed. But if you can reach the jump point before they catch us, we can escape into faster-than-light travel. Junho pushed the engines harder, and the ship groaned in protest. He knew this vessel like he knew his own hands. Every wire, every bolt, every hidden weakness. He also knew exactly how far he could push it before something broke. Hold together, he whispered to the ship. Just a little longer. Weapons fire streaked past them, and one blast grazed the hull. The ship shuddered, and more warning lights joined the chorus of alarms. But Junho kept flying, weaving through space with instincts he did not know he possessed. Perhaps spending years fixing ships had taught him more than he realized. Perhaps something else was guiding his hands. Jump point in 90 seconds. Kethan shouted. Another blast struck them, and something exploded in the rear compartment. Smoke filled the air, and Junho could barely see the controls, but he did not stop. He could not stop. Sioha was depending on him. 50 seconds more weapons. Fire another hit that sent them spinning. 20 seconds. The pursuing ships were almost on top of them. One more shot would finish them. 10 seconds. Junho closed his eyes and pressed the jump button. The universe twisted around them, and suddenly they were somewhere else entirely. Stars that Junho did not recognize filled the view screen, and the pursuing ships were gone. They had made it. Kethan slumped against the console with relief, and Junho allowed himself to breathe. But Sioha's voice, weak but urgent, cut through the moment of peace. Junho, come here. I need to tell you something. There is no more time to wait. He left the controls and knelt beside her bed. Her face was pale as moonlight, and her silver veins were dimmer than before. The plague that is killing my people, she began, her voice barely above a whisper. It is not natural. We created it. Junho blinked in confusion. What? Centuries ago? The Vethkai went to war against another species, a terrible war that threatened to destroy us both in desperation. Our scientists created a biological weapon, a plague designed to target only our enemies. Her eyes filled with ancient shame. We won the war. But the plague did not disappear. It mutated, evolved, learned, and eventually it came home. Junho understood now. The Vethkai were not victims of some cosmic accident. They were victims of their own violence, their own fear, their own willingness to destroy. There is a cure, Sioha continued. Our scientists discovered it long ago, but it requires something we cannot provide. What does it require? A genetic template from a species that evolved on a death world, a world so harsh and dangerous that survival itself required constant adaptation. A species whose immune system is not just defensive but aggressive, designed to fight and overcome anything. She looked at him with eyes full of wonder. Humans evolved on such a world. Your planet tried to kill you with disease, with predators, with poison and radiation and 1,000 other dangers, and you survived. You adapted. You became something extraordinary without even knowing it. Junho shook his head slowly. But there are billions of humans. Why me specifically? Because the cure does not just require human genetics. It requires human genetics that have already fought and won against great illness. The antibodies. The cellular memory. The biological experience of victory. Understanding crashed over Junho like a wave. The plague. He said quietly. The one that killed my sister, the one I survived. Yes, Siola confirmed. Your body learned from that fight. Your immune system adapted in ways that even your own doctors did not understand. You carry within you the key to saving my entire species. Junho sat back. Overwhelmed all, those years of survivor's guilt all. Those nights wondering why he lived when his sister died, all. That pain and confusion and anger. Now he learned that his survival had a purpose, that his sister's death had meaning beyond mere tragedy. I thought I was. Nobody, he said softly. You are not nobody, Siola replied, reaching out to touch his face. You are the answer to a prayer that my people did not even know how to speak. The ship's sensors suddenly flared with new. Alert Skethan's voice cut through the moment. We are approaching Vethkai space, but there is a problem. Junho moved back to the view screen and felt his stomach drop ahead of them. The Vethkai homeworld floated in the darkness of space, a beautiful planet of silver, oceans and white mountains. But between them and that world was an armada, hundreds of ships, thousands perhaps, all armed and waiting. The faction that rejected the oracles. Vision has taken control, Kethan said grimly. They would rather let our species die than be saved by a human. Junho stared at the wall of warships blocking their paths, so close to the answer, so close to saving an entire people, and yet so impossibly far. The armada stretched across space like a wall of silver, and Death Junho counted more ships than he could comprehend, battle cruisers the size of cities, fighters swarming like angry insects, weapons platforms that glowed with enough power to crack moons, and their tiny courier ship floated before them, all like a leaf facing a hurricane. They are hailing us, Kethan said quietly. Answer them. Junho replied. The view screen flickered, and a face appeared, an ancient Vethkai with eyes like dying stars and a voice like cracking ice. Oracle Siola, the Ancient One, spoke. You have brought shame upon your order. You have led an enemy to our sacred homeworld. For this, you will die, and your human pet will die with you. Siola tried to rise from her bed, but she was too weak. Junho stepped forward instead. Wait, he said. The Ancient One's eyes narrowed with contempt. The insect speaks. How amusing. Tell me, creature, do you have any last words before we erase you from existence? Junho thought about everything that had brought him here. A rainy night in an alley, a wounded girl, a simple decision to help. He thought about his sister, dying in his arms while he begged her to stay. He thought about years of grief and guilt, years of believing he was worthless, years of fixing other people's machines because he could not fix himself. And then he thought about Siola, who had searched across the entire galaxy and found him nobody, nothing, just a man with a wrench. Your oracle searched the galaxy for someone worthy of saving you, Junho began, his voice steady despite his fear. 11 of them found legends, warriors who had conquered worlds, scientists who had unlocked the secrets of creation, admirals who commanded fleets of thousands. He paused, letting the words sink in. One of them found me, a maintenance worker who has never held a weapon, who has never left his homeworld, who fixes broken machines in a quiet corner of a forgotten planet. The Ancient One's expression flickered with something that might have been curiosity. I do not know why the threads of fate chose me. Junho continued. I do not know why my survival matters to your people, but I know this. Your oracle traveled across the stars while wounded and hunted, risking everything on the belief that I could help. He looked at Siola, pale and weak, but still watching him with hope in her eyes. She just needed some help, and she chose me against all fate, against all logic, Against everything that made sense, she believed in me when no one else would have. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the Armada seemed to hold its breath. "You can kill us now," Junho said finally. "You can destroy this ship and prove that the Vethkai would rather die with pride than live with hope, or you can let us land. And let me try to save your people." He spread his arms, making himself as vulnerable as possible. "I am just a man who fixes broken things. Your people are broken, and I want to help. That is all I am offering. That is all I have." The Ancient One stared at him for a long moment. Then, incredibly, his expression changed. The contempt faded, replaced by something older and more complicated, weariness perhaps, or regret, or the faintest ghost of hope. "Stand down," the Ancient One commanded across the Armada. Weapons-powered off-ships moved aside, creating a path to the planet below one by one. The captains of the fleet acknowledged the order, and the commander, who had hesitated before the one whose ship bore the markings of Cathan's family, was the first to stand aside. "Proceed to the medical facility," the Ancient One said, his voice softer now. "We will see if your fate holds true." Human. The landing was smooth despite everything. Junho helped carry Seoha into a gleaming medical center where Vethkai doctors waited with expressions caught between skepticism and desperate hope. They took his blood, first vial after vial, until he grew dizzy. Then they took samples of his bone marrow, a process so painful that he screamed. Despite trying to stay silent, they examined his cells, his antibodies, his entire biological history. Through it all, Junho endured. He thought about his sister again, how she had suffered at the end, how she had held his hand and told him to be brave. He was finally being brave. Hours passed. Then Dae Shunho lay in a recovery bed while the Vethkai scientists worked with his genetic material. Seola healed slowly, visiting him whenever she could stand, and then, on the 7th day, the doctors came with news. The cure was working. The first Vethkai patients were recovering. The plague that had threatened to destroy an entire species was finally being defeated. Months later, the first healthy Vethkai child in a decade was born. The Galactic Collective watched in disbelief as news spread across the star. Humanity, the youngest, smallest, most overlooked species in the galaxy, had saved the oldest and most powerful. Junho returned to Earth. When his work was done, he went back to his small apartment, back to his job at the spaceport, back to fixing broken machines like nothing had changed. But everything had changed one evening. As he walked home through the same alley where he had found Seola, he saw a familiar figure waiting in the shadows. She looked healthy now, her silver veins glowing bright, her white hair shimmering in the evening light. "You came back," he said. "I had to see you again," Seola replied, stepping out of the darkness. "To thank you properly," Junho shrugged, uncomfortable with gratitude. "You needed help," he said simply. "That is all." Seola smiled, and it was like watching a star being born. The threads of fate have never been brighter around any single being in the galaxy. She told him, "You are going to do incredible things." "Kang Junho, I have seen it." He laughed quietly and shook his head. "I'm just a man who fixes broken things." "Yes," she agreed. "And that is exactly why the universe needed you." She kissed his cheek gently and walked away into the night. Junho watched her go, then turned and continued home. Tomorrow, there would be more machines to repair, more things to fix, more small problems to solve. That was what humans did, and sometimes that was exactly what the galaxy needed.